Welcome to GV247.tv, the Global Vision Channel, a non-profit web TV channel bringing biblical perspective to the world in which you live.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of a two-part programme we're doing for Channel 1, the weekend programme here on Global Vision TV. And it's a special, it's an Israel special. We're going down in depth into what's at the basic, what's the cause of all this trouble in the Middle East. We haven't gone into the full biblical aspect of it because there are plenty other people who have done that, and we have lots of that on Channel 25, Focus on Israel. We have Channel 14, The End Times. We have Channel, oh my goodness, I can't remember. I think it's 18, but the Bible. We have plenty, Bible expositors, experts, scholars, academics, pastors, teachers, and people that just work in their area of expertise explaining all different aspects of the Bible. So we welcome you back. And we have with us Tricia Miller from Camera. There will be more information in the description. So please, if you haven't watched last week's episode, then please do so. Because we've looked at a number of aspects about the cause of October 7th, what actually happened, who the Palestinians are, Gaza, the West Bank, and of course, what these places are really called. Where did the Palestinians come from? We look at the PLO, Yasser Arafat. We've touched on a number of subjects, not least, who is Hamas, Hezbollah, and the terrorists in Judea and Samaria. So we've still got lots and lots to talk about, and my goodness, I hardly know where to start. We spoke last week about the amount of money, the billions, our tax dollars, pounds, euros, that's gone in to the so-called the Palestinian people, it's gone into Gaza, for example, and which has ended up in the pockets of the terrorist organizations that run these places. So we finished off by speaking about the Houthis last week because at that time of recording, we were entering possibly a war scenario with the Yemenis and the terrorist organizations there. So what I'd like to do just now, if this is okay with you, Tricia, is what could you tell us about Syria? Because Syria is also an enemy of Israel. Could you give us a little bit background on that before we come to talk about the big one, Iran?
Syria is in one sense a country on its own. You know, they've been in civil war for years and years and years. The Syrian government is responsible for the murder of untold hundreds of thousands, if not more, of its civilians. However, they're not unconnected from Iran either. It all, like we were talking about last week, it all goes back to Iran. There are Iran militias in Syria, and they're on the border, and those terrorist organizations are shooting rockets at Israel as well. So Israel, we were talking about you started off with last week talking about all the different fronts that Israel is at war on. This is another one. The Syrian border up in the north, especially the Galilee, that area, they're the ones who receive these. They're the destination of these rockets from Syria. But it's people who are orchestrated and supplied by Iran. So Syria is no friend of Israel. They too are part of this whole Islamic dogma that Israel must be destroyed.
And of course, Syria was always backed by Russia, or the Soviet Union, I remember, way back. And of course, that opens up the scenario in an even more scary way for people who don't have their eyes on the Lord and they are concerned about what's happening in the world. A wee question, why won't Syria or Egypt, so there's a peace treaty with Egypt and with Jordan, for example, but why will none of these people take the people who have now become refugees with what's been going on?
That's a very good question. Throughout history, whenever there have been refugees that are the result of a war, other nations take them in. Why? In this case, These are Arab brethren. Why do none of their Arab or Islamic brethren all around them take them in? We're now in the fourth generation from the original refugees from the 1948 war. And I think you mentioned last week that Arabs left the land under the instruction of the other Arab countries. They said, well, just get out of the way. We're going to have this war. We're going to annihilate all the Jews, and then it'll be safe for you to go back. Well, the war didn't turn out the way the Arab nations thought, the nations who gathered together to attack this brand new Jewish state. Israel won, and now there's a Jewish state. And Israel, at the time, the Jews pleaded with their Arab neighbors not to leave. You don't have to leave. They had been living in peace, especially in Haifa. They pleaded with them not to leave, but the Arabs listened to the leaders of the Arab nations and they left. Israel has always strived for amicable living, living side by side. It's the Arabs who don't. So unfortunately, what's happened is now we're in the fourth generation from those original, quote, refugees who should have been taken in those first years by other Arab nations. Genetically, most of them, it's been proven they're from Jordan or from Egypt. Those are their people, and they have the same culture. They speak the same language. They should have been taken in. So why? Well, there's a number of reasons, but unfortunately, one of the predominant ones is that they are being used as pawns in this propaganda war against Israel. The Arab nations do not care about these people. If they cared about them, they would let them in and let them start a new life. But the people who identify as Palestinians who do live in Jordan are kept separate. They are not allowed to get jobs. They are not allowed to live like other Jordanians. So they are persecuted. They are discriminated against by their Arab brethren, and they're used as pawns, because the longer this goes on, the world can continue to believe that this is Israel's fault. Again, it's all Israel's fault. So they're used as pawns. They are not cared for by their own people, and they are displaced. They do, however, live well in Israel proper. 20% of Israel's population is Arab, and they have good lives there. Under Israeli law, Arabs have equal rights. There are Arab doctors, there are Arab lawyers, there are Arab Supreme Court justices, et cetera, et cetera. They have a good life under Israel. It's the Arab governments who persecute them and have kept them in this status where no other people in the world that has had to move because of war has been kept. The UN has even established a separate organization, UNRWA, specifically for overseeing supposedly the care of these poor displaced people. But as we've seen throughout this war with Hamas, those workers are also Hamas terrorists. That's another subject, but that's also come out that UNRWA in Gaza has only been there supporting Hamas. They are not helping the people, the civilians of Gaza.
Iran. What's it all about? Why do they hate the Jews? Could you give us an answer, Tricia? Why do they all hate the Jews? Why does Islam hate the Jews? And are they the only people that Islam hates?
It's militant Islam that is now running Iran. And they're not Arabs, they are Persians. They're not Arabs, as in Lebanon and Syria, etc. But the common denominator of all of these enemies of Israel is their adherence to militant Islam. And Islam teaches the hate, if you read the Quran, teaches the hate and the need to dominate and conquer anyone who doesn't agree with their belief, exactly along with their belief. The word Islam means submission. This is not some people say, oh, it's from the word for peace. This is not a religion of peace. This is a religion that demands submission. And they talk about, Islam teaches the world's divided into two houses, the house of peace and the house of war. And when they are in a state of war, Islam is in a state of war with Western civilization. It's because Western civilization is not submitted yet to Islam. What Islam means by a house of peace is when everyone will be submitted to Islam. And what people don't understand, what militant Islam requires is absolute submission, domination of everyone, belief-wise, but this particularly applies to the total domination of women, of gays, lesbians. There is no, and so it blows my mind when feminists and when gay activists in the West are advocating for Islam or standing up and supporting Hamas. And they have no comprehension that if they went to Gaza, they would be, the gays would be stoned or thrown off roofs. That's what they do. Or worse, before they kill them, they do worse things. And women have no rights and are totally subjected to men. They have no right. So back to what happened in Israel on October 7th, with the number of atrocities that were committed against women and are still, there's still hostages that are still being subjected to horrible things. And the feminists of the world and the women in the organizations in the world who are supposedly, stand up against rape and any kind of, maltreatment of women, they've all been silent. They will not speak out against Hamas's atrocities against women in particular. Women and children were particularly targeted by Hamas on October 7th, and the world organizations and the feminist groups will not say a word. Now, what is that? What is that? It's a total inconsistency with what they say that they believe and stand for. And it goes back to, we are on territory now, even talking about militant Islam, we're on territory where we can be accused of being Islamophobes. There's nothing Islamophobic about anything we're saying. What we're trying to do is speak the truth and reveal the truth. These are the tenets of this religion that they are quite public about. It's in the Quran. They're public about it. We're not to be phobic about something. Is a phobia is a fear of something that's not rational. What we're talking about is very rational, done from analysis of what the beliefs of this religion are. And you asked if Jews are the only people they hate. No, it's Christians are also next. Basically, it's anybody, like I said at the beginning, basically it's anyone who doesn't agree with them, doesn't believe in their doctrine. But in the Quran, it specifically teaches against the Jews and the Christians, because these are the two Abrahamic faiths who came first. And now Islam claims to be an Abrahamic faith because Muslims are descended from Ishmael. That's another whole story too, but they specifically are opposed to Jews and Christians, and they say this is their saying when they talk about who they're going to either dominate or annihilate. Sometimes when they're being nice, through their years of history for 14 centuries, as they dominate and conquer people, sometimes they don't just kill you. Sometimes I'm being sarcastic, they're nice. They give you a choice. You can convert or be killed. But the people they target are the Jews and the Christians, and they say first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people, referring to the Jews worship on Saturday and the Christians worship on Sunday. So Christians are next, and that's what Christians don't understand, that this is not all about Jews. This is not all about Israel, what's happening now. It is, in that Israel is on the front line, and spiritually and scripturally, we also know that from that standpoint, it is about Israel. But in their mind, in the Islamic mind, it is about all of us in Western civilization, and all of us must, in their minds, come under the dominion of Islam.
Nobody wants to tackle this. As you say, if we speak about this, we're called Islamophobes. Well, as you say, phobic is fear. No, it's not that. It's just like we can say, well, I actually know, I know Muslims. I know I have Muslim friends. and I do believe they're friends. They are not heavily religious because they wouldn't be allowed to be a friend with me. Some lovely Muslims around, Hindus, Sikhs, Sikh friends, they're warriors. And Buddhists, which is my background, New Age Buddhist background, and people, think that's just a religion of peace, which it isn't. So there are all different faith groups out there. But this is the major thing that they have in common, the enemies of Israel, is the Islamic faith. So we've spoken about Iran. What about the ICJ overall?
ICJ stands for the International Court of Justice, which is it's a biased organization to begin with against Israel, but just this month, South Africa has brought a case against Israel to the ICJ, accusing Israel of genocide. It's ludicrous. For one thing, if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, they're really, really bad at it. The facts say that they're not committing genocide. The population of Gaza has multiplied in the last decades. The number of Palestinians living in Gaza has multiplied. If Israel's trying to commit genocide, means you're trying to wipe out a certain group of people. So Israel's not doing a very good job at it, obviously. And it's also ludicrous because what happened on October 7th was attempted genocide. Hamas has stated they intend to do the same thing over and over until there are no Jews. They actually didn't expect to get stopped as fast as they did. On October 7th, they had plans to go further into the interior of Israel that same day in their rampage. Their purpose is genocide. It's in writing. It is stated in their charter. So for South Africa to accuse Israel of genocide is just flipping it completely backwards. It's a classic case of accusing someone of something that's actually being done to them. So there's no basis for this. And for it to come from South Africa, of all places, who also is part of the accusation about apartheid, when actually South Africa had real apartheid, where people were segregated by race and the Black people were horribly oppressed. You can't go to Israel and without seeing that there is no apartheid in Israel. So that charge is just as ludicrous. And it's all of Israel's enemies who are jumping on this and supporting South Africa in this accusation. There's no basis for it. Israel does everything they can to protect civilians, no matter who they are, especially in Gaza. They are always careful of civilians. They target missile sites. They target Hamas headquarters to take out terrorists. If there are civilians in sight, they call off the strike. I could go on and on with examples that prove that not only is Israel not committing genocide, but they protect civilian life at the expense of the success of their mission at the time.
We know that Israel has access to some of the most advanced weapons. All they have to do is press a button. If they wanted to commit genocide and wipe out a people who call themselves Palestinians, they could do it so quickly, so easily.
Gaza could have been completely wiped out on October 8th. If they wanted to commit genocide, Israel, like you said, has powerful, powerful weapons. They could have just bombed the entire place. Why are they taking all this time, costing Israeli lives, IDF soldiers dying, going into Gaza because they're trying to go house to house? They're trying to be so careful of protecting Gazan life. It's Israel who created the road for civilians to evacuate the north part of Gaza first, and now other parts. They have created the roads and told civilians evacuate. What kind of an army tells its enemies in advance where it's going to attack so that it can get civilians out of the way? That's bad military strategy. If you really want to win a war, if you really want to commit genocide, you just kill them anyway. But if you really want to win a war, you don't tell the enemy, we're going to strike here tomorrow, so all of you civilians need to get out. That's what Israel does.
I don't know any other nation that would have done this after the atrocities of October 7th. I don't know any other nation that would have held back the way Israel has. But that's why I brought up the ICJ, because this is the thing. There is this constant pressure there. And again, I've asked a rhetorical question. Why? Why the hatred? And it has to come back to the Bible. It has to come back to spiritual warfare. Oh my goodness. I think we need to move on to talk about the media now, which is what you're all about. But just before I do, another thing which has irritated me no end is the so-called BDS movement, which again we've spoken about in previous programs, where everybody's being told to not to buy or embargo all Israeli goods. And I remember now, what was it? The company that made the soda siphon, Soda Stream.
Soda Stream.
Yep, for example. And so people were boycotting them. So what happened? Well, they closed their factory down. And the number of, I have to say in inverted commas, Palestinians who lost their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the BDS thing, it's not affecting Israel as such. It's their workers who suffer as well. So there's all of that now.
Well, that's back to using the Palestinians as a pawn in the propaganda war against Israel. Because when those kind of companies like SodaStream shut down their factories, they were employing Palestinian workers. Those Palestinians lost their jobs, and they were making far more and had good benefits. They were making far more at that job than at any job that they could make in the West Bank. So it's the Palestinians who are hurt by that kind of thing, not Israel. It's using them as a pawn. Back to that.
Mm-hmm. I remember, I think Scarlett Johansson, the actress, Jewish actress, I think she advertised SodaStream or one of the other Israeli companies, and everybody was trying to boycott her, which is quite funny when you think of Hollywood, the number of Jews active there. But anyway, it's not funny for those who are being punished this way for any Jewish association. So it boils down to anti-Semitism. Now, I don't think we really have time to talk about what's the difference between anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and so on. So, Tricia, could you just give us a straightforward definition? What is anti-Semitism?
I'm going to go to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. They came up in 2016, came up with a working definition of anti-Semitism. So I'm going to read that first, and then just talk about a few ways it applies. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Okay, so the bottom line is it's hatred of Jews. It doesn't have anything to do with Muslims, because they're Semitic, but nobody is hating them. So this is specifically about Jews. But you said the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. At this point, there's no distinction, there's no line. I'm reading again here from their statement. Manifestations of anti-Semitism may include the targeting of the state of Israel, conceived as a Jewish collectivity. Okay, and then they give contemporary examples of anti-Semitism. One of them is calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews. What did we just see on October 7th? And what have we seen in the worldwide demonstrations since then? These massive demonstrations in major cities around the world, justifying and supporting what Hamas did. That's nothing but anti-Semitism. There's another manifestation that can happen that is part of anti-Semitism, and that is denying the fact, the scope, or the mechanisms, or the intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany during the Holocaust. Okay, we know, those of us in this field, there's Holocaust denial is rampant. That has been. But what has been absolutely incredible. What we have seen is within a couple days of October 7th, the supporters of Hamas, the media, worldwide media, denying that this happened when the evidence that we have is from their own cameras. So how can they deny that it happened? They do, they deny it. And so we are seeing in real time the denial of the atrocities that just happened.
To end this program, I'm going to throw a 3-part question to you. All right. Can you explain the different ways that the media distorts the news about Israel and the war? Secondly, how can people detect the bias? And last but not least, how can we counter it? So over to you, Tricia.
Well, the media distorts things in various ways, one of which is an overemphasis on Israel. If you look at world news, there's lots going on in the world outside of Israel, but there's a focus on Israel. That's very, very briefly, but that's it. Factual errors. What's really blown my mind, and many of us, our minds, since October 7th, is media outlets, especially people like the BBC, the New York Times. They will say Hamas said, and they're quoting them like this is accurate, and then they'll say, and Israel claims, but we have yet to verify that claim. So that this bias where they believe Hamas and they don't believe Israel. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. Okay. So you have to look for factual errors. Don't depend on sources that quote Hamas, because Hamas lies. Look for a complete lack of balance where there's all this emphasis on one side. Another way that the facts get distorted is through omission, by leaving out details. You can tell a partial story and have it be false because you've left out something. You've left out facts, you've left out details, you've left out context. Applying a double standard to Israel that's not used for any other nation in the world. Israel is always held to a higher standard, a double standard. And another thing that's done is editorializing the news stories. Instead of just reporting, the news is supposed to report what's going on, but there's editorializing happening in the stories. And so what can people do? Analyze the headlines, look at the headlines. I'll give you one example. Years ago, there was in Jerusalem, a terrorist went into a synagogue and hacked people to death who were there praying. And there were a couple of terrorists, and security forces came along and shot the terrorists. So the headline says, Israeli forces shoot Palestinians. Like, so what are you going to get from that? You're just going to make the assumption, oh, Israelis just like to shoot Palestinians. No context, no explanation. You had to read way down in the story to find out, oh, these guys were terrorists who went in there with axes and they were hacking Jews to death, and somebody shot them to stop them from killing more Jews. That kind of thing. You have to look at the headlines. They are crafted to add to this narrative. Research photographs you see. Many of the photographs you are seeing now are not real. They can be completely tampered with. They can be faked, staged. The Palestinians stage scenes, or you're seeing a picture that's taken from a completely different setting. One example of that, one picture of some poor girl who's sitting in the midst of rubble, bombed, a building that's been bombed, and crying. And they put it with a story of what's currently happening in Gaza. But that picture was from Syria years ago. We saw the same picture from Syria. That's just one example. And so notice how the headlines and the pictures tend to humanize only one side. They'll show you a little girl like that, which that'll pull on any normal person's heartstrings. Of course, that's horrible for a little girl to be sitting in the midst of rubble. But when terrorists have killed Jews, they show the mother of the terrorist crying if her son was killed. They don't show you the families of the Jewish victims. So that's another example. They humanize the terrorists. They don't humanize the Jews. And then read the op-eds. And I'll finish with this because op-eds are probably the most read part of any publication, and look for imbalance, look for factual errors. This means you have to do some research. You have to know, what you're talking about, and then write letters to the editor or write articles, speak out, write to correct it or speak out to correct it. But the bottom line is you have to be informed. You can't rely on one news source. You need to read multiple news sources and look for the truth. You have to work at it. You have to look for the truth.
Working in the media, and particularly as a documentary filmmaker, I've had to do courses on the law, on media law, to have our programs shown on television. So whether it's shown on terrestrial television here or on Amazon Prime and so on and so forth, because the law really tightened up just a few years ago. And don't ask me what year, because I've lost track of time with the whole COVID thing and everything, literally.
Mhm.
But so you couldn't skew any documentary made. For example, you couldn't pay your contributors because they're like expert witnesses. So you don't pay a contributor on a documentary. You would pay the crew or narrator or whatever, something like that. But it was the same with reporting, because look, I know how it works. We have my husband was an advertising photographer. You would put a little teddy bear in the middle of the rubble, make sure it's looking tattered. I'm not saying we did it, but it was really common. That's what people did to take their photographs, war photographers and so on, because a picture tells us, 1,000 words. It says it all.
Right.
But for goodness sake, those that we have seen, you're absolutely right. We've seen so much footage. We've actually had to laugh. It's not funny, but like pro-Palestinian footage, not even this time around, but in the past, it's the same actor. He's on a stretcher. He's being put into the back of an ambulance. He's being dug out of rubble. He's dead.
Or he's dead.
He's dead. We've got to laugh, and the thing is, they have a really good media machine, Hamas. This is the thing, we've got good relations with the Israeli government and the embassy and so on, and we're able to speak to a lot of these people, and we're going, come on, Israel, you've got everything going for you. Your media machine ought to be as good as anybody's in the world, and yet. And this is what brings us back again to it has to be supernatural. That is like the powers of darkness. This is the only way I can put it, appear to be winning. And again, we have to look back to our Bibles and say, look, what are the days that we're living in? But that doesn't mean that we sit down and we just let it all happen. When there is injustice, there's a time to rise up, not for everybody to rise up, not for everybody to go out on the streets or write letters. I'm very clear about that. And here at Global Vision TV, we're very clear about it. We never advocate working against your government, because Jesus is very clear. The word is clear. We live within the law. But sometimes the Lord will stir you just to do something. And you always come at it, please, I've said it again and again, you come at it as a concerned citizen. And I have had arguments with Israelis about this, Tricia, seriously, and Americans are worse. I have to say this, because you come from a Christian country. We don't. We're post-Christian here, unfortunately. That's the way it is. I know the United States, Canada's almost post-Christian. The United States is going that way. So we do not go to our local council or government and say, I'm a Christian and this, that, and the next thing. They're not interested. We are the enemy. Well, so we should be an enemy of the world, but you understand what I'm saying. But you do go as a concerned citizen. You don't need to wear your faith on your sleeve, as it were. If you have a strong view on this, and don't be afraid to speak up as a concerned citizen. So that's the whole BDS thing and all the rest of it. So how do you spot the bias? How do we counter it then, Tricia? Really, just to sum up in a sentence again.
The bottom line is everybody has to be informed on their own. You can't spot it. If you don't know the truth, you can't recognize the lies. You have to be informed.
Jesus said the first sign of the sign of his return and the end of the age in which we're living is deception. And you will be deceived if you don't know the truth. If you don't know the truth is a person. His name is Yeshua. His name is Jesus, the Lord Jesus Christ, and his word. If you don't know the truth, and it's the same with this whole situation we're talking about, if you don't know the truth, you can't share it with others. Tricia, you've got such a difficult job, and I know how busy you are, and I really do thank you for giving this precious time to Global Vision TV. And we will indeed, everybody will share it far and wide. We'll be sharing it across all our social media platforms. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So we need it to be millions of people, but the Lord knows. Is there anything you'd like to say to finish, Tricia? Because you've done a splendid job so far. You really have, and I'm hoping you'll be back again.
Well, what I was thinking of was that we need to talk at some future point about the spiritual roots of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And just as a little teaser, it is, you've talked about, it's a spiritual battle. This is happening. Why do people hate the Jews? To go back to the root, we need to talk about the spirit of Amalek, all the way back to Genesis, the history between the Amalekites and the Israelites, all the way through history. So I think that's for a Christian audience. They need to understand the biblical and spiritual roots of this whole conflict.
I rather think that when we sign off now, you and I will be getting our diaries out again, or our calendars or agendas, whatever you want to call it, and making a date for that. So thank you again, Tricia. And dear viewer, please, if you have questions, write into us, info@globalvision.tv. I'm just saying so that we can field things and we can pass them on to Tricia if we can't deal with it in the studio here or answer your questions. But more than anything, be praying. Be praying. Don't open your mouth unless the Lord leads you to do it. I think that's one of the most important things. Be very careful what you say, where you say it, when you say it, but be sure it is always the truth. Thank you again, Tricia. The Lord bless you until we meet again. Thank you, dear viewer. We'll see you next week. Remember, we've got 25 channels here and over 1,000 programs, most of them very short, with overviews and all the different areas that we cover. Please write in with your own suggestions. We'll have our international discussion panel coming back soon. We'll be looking at gold dust falling because, why not, when our brothers and sisters are being massacred, ripped alive, flayed and sexually abused in Nigeria, where what's happened to our Jewish brethren is happening. Why shouldn't God be sprinkling gold dust on those of us in the West? That is said with an enormous amount of irony. But we'll be looking at a number of issues. So that's coming up soon. We've got our in-depth interviews and programs about artificial intelligence and transhumanism. But more than anything, we're here to encourage you, uplift you, and point you always towards the Lord Jesus Christ and his word. So thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. And my thanks again to Tricia from camera, and there will be information again down in the description on the YouTube channel. So the Lord bless you till we meet again. Bye-bye just now. God bless. Bye.
This is GV247.tv, bringing biblical perspective to the world in which you live. A powerful free resource with hundreds of short films on a wide range of Bible topics from experts around the world, plus full-length sermons and programs for teaching and encouragement. Choose from current affairs, signs of the times, a chance to voice your own opinion, and special offers on our full-length feature films, documentaries, and study materials. At over 4 hours in length, the Lamplight Project is a systematic 12-part Bible study series, a powerful teaching tool that begins with the origins of life and takes the viewer on a comprehensive journey packed with high-profile interviews, film, graphics, and illustrations, concluding with the return of Christ and an encouragement to stand firm and be faithful. Complete with a free study guide download for both personal and group study, this powerful interactive guide connects to over 1,000 programs with expert interviews on gv247.tv, our free service web TV channel. Does My Life Have Meaning? A powerful 1-hour presentation produced from the Lamplight Project. With a free copy of the Gospel of Luke, this film is crammed with engaging interviews, film and graphics. A life-challenging film to those searching for answers. As distributors for the Jesus film, we offer this timeless movie based on Luke's Gospel. This clear presentation of the life of Jesus Christ has been viewed worldwide and translated into over 1,200 languages. We provide the film with a free copy of the Gospel of Luke. The Daniel Project is a popular TV documentary that presents an overview of Bible prophecy and an encouragement to read the signs of the times. Hailed as one of the best TV films to be made on the subject, DVD extras feature a heart-to-heart interview about the way of rescue. Based loosely on the documentary, The Daniel Connection is a full-length feature film. This fictional thriller incorporates many of the themes promoted through pop culture and social media which affect people on a global scale. Launched at the Cannes Film Festival, The Daniel Connection points the ever-skeptical viewer to search the Bible for answers to life's deepest questions. We've been serving the body of Christ for over 30 years, and if you would like further information, please do not hesitate to get in touch.